Hello there, and welcome back. My name is Sean Reimer, I don't rhyme, and I have autism. This is something I've mentioned before in passing, but I've never actually sat down and made a dedicated video about it. And it's not a matter of me not having time either. I rarely have time for any of my videos to begin with. I simply did not want to make a video regarding my diagnosis. Considering the discourse in the world right now around autism spectrum disorder, I honestly don't blame myself for not making one sooner. In my experience, people tend to either demonize it, infantilize it, romanticize it, or make it the sole thing they communicate to the world. The fortunate part of my process on YouTube is that I have not, nor will I ever, make videos for anyone except myself. And I've hit a point in my life where I cannot leave my thoughts in the boiling poutine that is my mind anymore. I was diagnosed as a kid, went through some very invasive therapy for it, got ignored by professionals decades later, and now the rest of the world thinks they're experts on the subject because they watched some TikToks and a 4-hour-long Chris Chan documentary. I in no way claim to be an all-inclusive source of information for such an unpredictable and varied disorder, and yes, it is a disorder. Let's not kid ourselves. But I hope my experiences can create a more grounded and informed discourse among both those on the spectrum and those who are not. Firstly, what even is autism? That may sound like a no-brainer question, but in my experience, there has been a lot of confusion as to how autism presents itself and how it actually impacts those who have it. For example, when I do tell someone my diagnosis, which is getting more and more rare over the years, there are people who respond with, "But you don't look autistic." To start, no, autism is not the same as Down syndrome. My chromosomes are fine. It's merely my mood that's down half the time. But also, I think a lot of the wording that spreads online or through word of mouth is incredibly vague. And in fairness, part of that is because the disorder can vary so much from person to person. You hear phrases like trouble socializing, intense interests, stimming, overstimulation, and hyperfocus, which may be true, but they often tell neurotypical people almost nothing of practical value. So, in accordance with multiple studies conducted over the past decade, here's one way I'll explain it. During early childhood, the brain makes a massive number of connections. As we develop, it optimizes those connections. It optimizes them by strengthening some while trimming others. That process is called synaptic pruning. Research into autism suggests that in at least some autistic brains, this process may be atypical. One study in 2014 found that synapses in one part of the brain were not being trimmed enough, while another study a decade later found that synapses in another part of the brain were being trimmed too much. So autism is not simply too many connections or not enough connections. It's more complicated than that, but broadly speaking, the autistic brain appears to develop, organize, and filter information differently. You can think of it like an editor. Sometimes certain cuts last way too long, and others get cut off before they properly land. The difference in this neurochemistry can help explain why people with autism are often highly specialized rather than jack of all trades. And for good and bad, I'm no exception. Around the age of 2, I was diagnosed with pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, or PDD-NOS. Now, if you have no clue what that is, rest assured several healthcare professionals didn't seem to know either. The DSM, the guidebook used to classify and diagnose mental disorders, was on its 4th iteration in the early 2000s. It has since been replaced by the DSM-5, which removed the specific subtypes of autism like PDD, NOS, and Asperger's, and incorporated them all under the autism umbrella. Society seems to have a thing for umbrellas lately.
There's always my love umbrella.
The problem is that, at least in my experience, medical professionals can be entirely dismissive of an outdated diagnosis rather than curious about it. But we'll circle back to that. I went through intensive behavior therapy around the age of 3 in the basement of my childhood home. And this therapy, while something I needed support around and something I don't blame my parents for, was less than ideal. I felt extremely isolated and sheltered for years, and the constant fear of new adults coming to my house translated into me being very standoffish when meeting people for the first time. And this has continued. Sorry for anyone who's had the misfortune of experiencing that for me. I am working on it. Food was restricted as punishment if I didn't do something that was considered normal. in the eyes of these therapists. I have more memories of those stressful experiences than I do of my own family from that time. What made it all the more disorienting was that by the time I was pulled out of this therapy when I started elementary school, I thought it was a completely normal thing that all kids went through at that age. And when I found out that wasn't the case, that began the consistent feeling of shame about starting life already inferior to others. My experiences in that basement shaped early beliefs that something was fundamentally wrong with me, that there were good and bad ways of being, that food could be psychologically linked with punishment, that normal criticism and rejection, things everyone experiences in life, would come loaded with a nice seasoning of shame and fear. And the part I didn't fully understand until recently is that what happened to me was not just some isolated bad experience in one basement. It came from a larger tradition of treating autistic children less like people in distress and more like behavior problems to be corrected. The form of autism therapy I experienced was applied behavior analysis, or ABA. ABA is built from behaviorist principles: reinforcement, punishment, extinction, shaping, repetition, and compliance. Do the desired behavior, receive the reward. Do the wrong behavior, lose access to something. Ignore the distress until the behavior stops. Repeat until the person becomes easier for everyone else to manage. And no, I'm not saying every modern therapist is secretly standing there with a lab coat and a rat maze, but I am saying the underlying logic matters. And this comparison to animal training is not just me being dramatic either. B.F. Skinner developed the theory of operant conditioning in the 20th century, studying how behavior is shaped by consequences. Rats and pigeons were placed in controlled environments, so researchers could study reinforcement and punishment. Food could be used as reinforcement. Adverse stimuli, like electricity, could be used as punishment. In the 1960s and 70s, Dr. Ole Ivar Lavas became one of the major figures applying these behaviorist principles to autistic children. His early work included aversive methods that are horrifying to read about now. He was also involved in the work that applied similar behavior modification logic to gender non-conforming children, including the case of Kirk Murphy, a 4-year-old boy treated in the 1970s to prevent what researchers described as adult transsexualism or similar adult sex role deviation. Murphy died by suicide in 2003, and members of his family have attributed his death to the trauma he experienced as a child. When you are 3 years old, you do not experience any of this as clinical framework. You experience it as adults entering your home, controlling your food, blocking escape, rewarding compliance, and teaching you that your natural reactions are wrong. You learn that distress is not something people respond to with care. It is something they try to extinguish. That's why I cannot talk about autism support without talking about this, because to this day, people still defend these methods as help, without understanding what it feels like to be the child on the other side of them. My own parents have struggled to believe the impact it had on me. My sister is only now starting to realize some of this herself, and I think that is part of why I need to say it out loud, because so many of us were taught to call it treatment before we were ever allowed to call it harm. I did need support. That is true. There may have even been parts of it that helped me communicate and function in the world. But something can teach you skills and still damage you. Something can be effective at changing behavior and still be wrong in what it teaches a child about themselves. Movies and TV became my lifelines early on, and I would often sample conversations from them. Slowly but surely, I was able to script responses, hide intense interests, and attempt to pass as normal. This is where a lot of my natural interest in acting, writing, and editing came from. And with a lot of interactions I had with people, I succeeded in my performance. But a performance like that is not sustainable. Masking drains my processing and energy to the point where if I'm trying too hard to look like I'm listening properly, I may stop being able to process what the person is actually saying. It's not to say that I struggled academically in school, quite the contrary, but the socialization and sensory aspects created struggles all their own. Masking, combined with the sheer amount of variation between autistic people, can lead to adults being doubted by professionals, even when there's already a childhood diagnosis sitting somewhere in their history. In my case, that diagnosis was PDD-NOS, the old diagnostic label that now falls under autism spectrum disorder, and somehow it had fallen through the cracks of Alberta's healthcare system. Good thing this province doesn't want to become its own country or anything.
I support a strong and sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. I know we might have a bit of a difference of opinion on that, but I hope people today feel a lot more confident that Canada works than they did a couple of days ago.
One psychiatrist flat out rejected the possibility that I was autistic and insisted that borderline personality disorder fit me better. Not because my childhood history had disappeared, not because the traits weren't there, but because I didn't match the narrow stereotype of what autism was supposed to look like. I was too verbal, too intense, too emotionally reactive, too socially practiced, too capable of appearing normal when I had to. That psychiatrist's decision set me back years. Once your life gets filtered through the wrong framework, you start interpreting everything else through it. Every shutdown becomes manipulation. Every misunderstanding becomes selfishness. Every overload becomes emotional instability. Every attempt to explain yourself becomes defensiveness. I had to unlearn a lot of shame that got reinforced by being treated as though my struggles were mainly flaws in my personality, rather than differences in how I processed the world. When I finally worked with the right professionals, a much clearer picture emerged. A lot of what had been treated as personality pathology made more sense through autism, trauma, interpersonal hypersensitivity, perfectionism, burnout, sensory overwhelm, and miscommunication. That does not mean I am magically exempt from accountability. It means the explanation matters. If you misunderstand the cause, you misunderstand the person. And I think that connects to a much larger problem. People still don't associate autism with complexity or intelligence. There's this assumption that if someone is articulate, intense, funny, creative, or self-aware, then they must also be fast, flexible, emotionally regulated, and socially fluent. But those things do not come as a package deal. You can be highly verbal and still process slowly. You can sound confident and still be overwhelmed. You can be intelligent and still need support. That is not something to infantilize. It is not something to romanticize, and it is definitely not some plague rotting society from the inside. It is a developmental difference that people keep trying to force into whatever story is most convenient for them. And one of the most convenient stories people tell about autism is that it must have been caused by something. I've been used to seeing wild stories in traditional media ever since I found out about that one doctor who seemed hell-bent on hiding his obsession with giving kids colonoscopies behind an obsession with proving that vaccines cause autism. And there haven't been many positive developments since that was unanimously debunked. Trump and RFK Jr., as of late, seem to be on this autism crusade, declaring the disorder an epidemic. And if history has taught us anything, it's that crusades tend to be a very stupid idea. The United States government continues to look for strange external sources of internal issues it has to deal with. And in the case of autism, their target is Tylenol.
But whether it's 1 in 12 or 1 in 31, can you imagine? That's down from 1 in 20,000, then 1 in 10,000. And now we're at the level of 1 in 12 in some cases for boys. 1 in 31 overall. Because when you go from 20,000 to 10,000, and then you go to 12, you know there's something artificial. They're taking something.
Last year, the US Food and Drug Administration started the process of changing the label on Tylenol to say that acetaminophen use during pregnancy may be associated with an increased risk of neurological conditions like autism and ADHD. But that wording matters. Associated with does not mean caused by. Studies can show that two things happen together, but proving that one causes the other is much harder, especially when pregnant women take Tylenol for a wide range of reasons, including pain, fever, infection, inflammation, and other issues that may themselves be relevant. And unfortunately, this confusion between correlation and causation is nothing new when it comes to autism. The vaccine panic that started nearly 30 years ago is another example of this, which is horrifying because fuck, I'm almost 30. Over the years, the media has pointed at vaccines, medications, food, diet, parenting, screen time, chemicals, and whatever else happens to be politically convenient that week. But people keep missing the basic point. If ice cream sales and shark attacks both spike in the summer, banning ice cream at the beach will not stop the shark attacks. It'll just leave everyone sweaty, angry, and still at the mercy of an autistic sharknado with no spatial awareness. The other problem is the general attitude behind all of this. By declaring autism an epidemic, it implies that autistic people are the aftermath of something gone wrong. At which point, people who do not bother to fact check decide there must be a cure. There must be something to prevent anyone else from being born with a disorder that does not automatically make someone intellectually inferior. And if people want to point to human accomplishment, they should be careful. Some of the most influential thinkers in history have been speculated to have autistic traits. Now, I'm not here to diagnose dead people like some kind of neurological ghost hunter, but it is worth noting that the same traits people demonize, intense focus, repetition, social difference, narrow interests, unusual communication, can also be part of how people make extraordinary contributions. Autism is not proof that someone is broken. It is not proof that someone is gifted either. It is not that simple, which unfortunately makes it much harder to shove into a headline. But there has been a new wave of misunderstanding and negative discourse around autism right at our fingertips: the internet. With Gen Z officially all grown up, so too are the Gen Z autistics who were raised by the internet. This is the first time in human history where the majority of media creation has been put in the hands of single individuals rather than collections of them. That can be an amazing thing for groups who would not have been able to find a voice otherwise. Naturally though, the freedom of the internet goes both ways. Some groups and individuals use that voice for infamy. And for some people, like Chris Chan, Daniel Larson, or Josh Block, autism becomes the scapegoat for all of their unprecedented behavior. If you don't know who these people are, there are multi-hour-long documentaries on each one examining their entire lives that you can watch if binging that one show is wearing you out. It's okay, that show is my favorite show too. Autism is only one factor in how someone navigates the world. It absolutely should not be used to explain psychosis, abuse, poor parenting, trauma, exploitation, online harassment, criminal behavior, addiction, and institutional failure. Of course, most of those things are harder to analyze. It is both simpler and more fun to blame autism and put people into a virtual Lolcows zoo exhibit where the audience knows exactly what buttons to press. Whether it's stealing a Sonichu medallion, saying Grace Vanderwall is dead, or putting fries in a bag.
Let's put the fries in the bag.
Australia! You fucking bitch! You're taking this!
I've wasted so much time watching those documentaries, I'm sorry. We owe it to ourselves to consider these cases more critically. What if Chris Chan's parents had not been in denial about his needs, and had been prepared to teach boundaries, privacy, and healthy relationships? Would he have been arrested for having sex with his geriatric mother?
Pardon my flatulence.
Autism can affect how someone understands social rules, but it does not remove the need for those rules to be taught, reinforced, and respected. What if Daniel Larson had been given structure early on to grow his musical interests away from a phone, while also being treated seriously for his reported severe mental illness? Would he have ended up in federal custody after issuing public threats against the White House and hospitals?
I sent a message to the fucking feds. If you fucking don't listen to me, I will fucking kill you too. Murder. Bomb you. The fucking White House too. Bomb you.
Psychosis is not autism. Delusions are not autism. Threats are not autism. Homelessness is not autism. Treating them all as one blob helps no one. What if Josh Block had been surrounded by decent people who aren't Jack fucking Dougherty? People who could have helped him build his routines around New York City into something safe and sustainable? Would he now be an alcoholic who is consistently encouraged to crash out at the drop of his captain's hat?
Why does that
If someone is drinking constantly on camera and the audience treats it like episodic entertainment, autism isn't the central element anymore. Addiction and exploitation are. Autism is broad, but that doesn't mean it's an individual's entire personality, a fact that is completely lost on many people who claim to support the disorder. I find it odd that people crave the attention autism provides, especially when, in practicality, It does not provide much when you've been masking most of your life, and the attention you do get is usually either demonization or infantilization. Another reason I don't tell people I'm autistic is so I can avoid hearing voices go up an octave or two and slow down to a crawl. In execution, it's not much different from the people who believe autism is an epidemic destroying human IQ. There are times I almost prefer that group over the condescending, "You're valid" crowd. Yeah, no shit, I'm valid. That should go without saying. Based on everything so far, I hope you can understand my confusion when people willingly self-diagnose themselves as autistic. And if I'm playing devil's advocate, there are reasons people do this that make sense on the surface. Formal assessment can be inaccessible, expensive, or otherwise a pain in the ass. Many people are missed too, especially with masking. Hell, the same healthcare system that diagnosed me as a child didn't preserve that diagnosis properly and didn't believe me close to 2 decades later. And I'm not a woman where symptoms can present differently and be missed even more often. But social media has taken these very real weak points and used them as fuel to run away with the idea that self-diagnosis is not only valid, but also the key to unlocking a whole new personality.
My least favorite thing about my ADHD/autism, and because I was masking so hard, I didn't get a lot of ways to stem. There was a week I was going, oh my god, that's bussin'. Like, I could not stop saying it.
This gets skewed even further when social media rewards an oversimplified cartoonish performance of autism put over music rather than a detailed, thoughtful discussion of a disorder that, spoiler, is not a personality or an aesthetic. This distorts how people see the disorder to the point where when they meet a formally diagnosed autistic person, they may not recognize what they're looking at. And that person may not get the support or genuine understanding they need. And I believe those things are needed now more than ever. We've built a world that is louder, faster, brighter, more abstract, more socially demanding, and more information dense than anything humans are evolved for. In that world, autistic brains can become both valuable and disabling. The same brain that can obsessively analyze patterns, build systems, edit films, memorize details, or notice what everyone else missed can also get crushed by noise, ambiguity, sudden change, and too much information arriving at once. So, after all of this, you may be asking why I'm making this video. If I hate both the demonization and infatuation of autism, then what's the point? What do I want? Well, it's to answer a different question I get asked a lot. How does it feel to be autistic? Normally I respond with a charming, I don't know, how does it feel to not be autistic? But if I'm being honest, it feels shameful. At least to me. I hate being constantly bombarded and overwhelmed through every one of my senses. There's not a day that goes by where talking to someone at a crowded restaurant is not an exercise. I hate the way my body moves like a Disney animatronic. I wish I could remove my limbs at night so I don't have to constantly adjust them while trying to sleep. I hate missing social cues that come obvious to everyone else. I hate missing context in conversations. I hate getting those conversations only 90% right because that 10% is what dehumanizes me. I hate how internally ableist I've been towards autistic people, wishing they could just be normal because I was brainwashed to believe that was the only way to achieve a successful and meaningful existence. I hate how I've become like those who hurt me. I have felt like an experiment since I was 3. Frankenstein together by punishments, both external and internal, and an ever-expanding series of lines picked up from various mediums in an attempt to Trojan horse my way through life. I feel like a fraud. I feel like Windows running on a Mac, or maybe more like a Hackintosh. I feel like anything I make is fraudulent because it comes from a foundation of experimentation and abuse. Even more so when I was later reprogrammed through an incapable mental health system that spent years doubting who I was to begin with. There are days I hate everyone else for being incompatible with me, and days I feel like I shouldn't exist for being incompatible with the world. And no matter what I do, no matter what people do and don't see from me, I see everything. I wish I were an imposter in my mind the same way I was when I was in that basement with those therapists. I don't make the videos I make for anyone else but myself. If I don't enjoy seeing myself in third person on an editing timeline, the video never happens. And I'm doing everything I can to not trash this one. Because I know that while it's not a video I want to make, it's a video I have to make for me. I have to remind myself that, like it or not, there is no cure. And that a cure would not be wise. I don't know how much of who I am would exist without this disorder. The ways I've adapted to communicate, the quintessential way I see the world, my interests, which frankly go beyond just interests. I look at the things I've done and the things I've yet to do, and I question if they would still be here if I were neurotypical. Would they be the same, better, worse, just different? I'll never know. And I don't think I want to. Autism is not the lens I see the world through. It's more like the camera body, the brain behind the image. And I hope the image has been something that contributes to humanity, despite any feelings otherwise. So I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing, regardless of my feelings. Because if there is one person I shouldn't struggle to maintain eye contact with, it's the weird guy on the screen who makes some cool things and has some cool things to say. I hope you agree. I hope I do too. I'm Sean Reimer. I don't rhyme. Thanks for watching. That includes you.